I'm getting bored here. Alright guys, it's enough.
Booze and booze.
I've spent my life walking into places most men would turn away from. Sand, snow, jungle, desert, it really didn't matter. Some of those places had tripwires and teeth, and others just had silence. Glacier National Park was supposed to be the kind of silence that would heal me. I'm a military guy, and I don't find comfort in many places. I took leave for the first time in years. You do 4 tours, bury a few friends, live off adrenaline and MREs, and eventually you stop trusting yourself around civilians. But out there where it's just boots, trees, and breathing, you can let your guard down a little bit, or at least so I thought. The route that I picked was a lonesome one. 8 days across the belly of the park, off those popular trails, hugging the spines of mountains that didn't care if I make it out or not. I had enough dried food and iodine tablets and bear spray to hopefully keep me alive. No satellite phone, just a topo map, compass, and my gut. Day 3, mid-afternoon, I ran into him. I was making my way down toward a glacial basin, the sun throwing shadows long and jagged across the trail. My knees were screaming from the descent, and I stopped to catch my breath near this snowmelt creek when I heard somebody approaching. Slowly, with these creepy-ass footsteps, I turned and there he was. A guy who looked like he lived out of his truck. Camo pants, sun-scorched coat, oversized orange beanie that did not match the weather. Beard like steel wool, eyes that didn't really blink. He had this big grin like we were old friends meeting. "Trail Angel," he said, reaching into his pack and pulling out a Ziploc bag of homemade jerky. "Name's Kyle. Thought I'd lighten your load a bit." Trail angels are usually long-distance hiker folklore, people who leave coolers of soda and snacks at junctions, but you normally don't meet them face to face, and never this deep off grid. But still, I took the jerky with a nod and didn't eat it though. We stood there for a few minutes. I kept it short, told him I'm heading towards the 50 mountain, playing my cards close. He pressed for more though, daily mileage, my gear, if I was armed. I told him enough to stay polite, but I watched his hands the whole time. "You're smart to do this solo," he said. "Nobody to argue with, nobody to hold you back." For some reason, something about the way he said that just stuck to my ribs. Now, I don't mind weirdos. I've been one and I kind of am one myself, but the look that he gave me before walking off downhill was not curiosity. It was almost like an assessment, like a butcher sizing up a cut of meat. I let him get a good 5 minutes ahead of me, then veered off the trail. I sat still and listened. Just heard the wind, no footsteps or breathing. Honestly, that's when I should have just turned around. Hindsight is funny like that. You can really pull apart a memory and pinpoint exactly where you fucked it all up at. I finished the day's hike and then camped off the trail just for the night. The next morning, I packed up before first light. Didn't cook, didn't make coffee, just shoved the gear in my pack, laced up my boots, and got moving. My plan was to put some serious distance between me and Kyle, or whatever the hell his actual name was. I hiked hard, cutting off the main track and through fields, burning up my quads on steep switchbacks most weekend warriors wouldn't even touch. By midday, I figured I had 20 miles behind me and maybe 10 more to go before reaching the backcountry zone near 𝐬𝐿 Pass. It was deep in bear country, but I preferred grizzlies over weirdos. I still had not seen another soul, and that's what made what happened next really hard to explain. I stopped to filter some water through a creek, narrow and fast moving, full of snowmelt, crystal clear. I crouched, filled up my bottle, and that's when I took note of something just a few feet upstream, a small dark object caught between some rocks. I waded over and fished it out. It was a strip of fabric, camo, same pattern as the pants Kyle had been wearing. Now, it could have been a coincidence, sure, it could have been just trash, but it was really clean and fresh. And then tucked into the mesh of the cloth was this sliver of a deer antler, sharpened up to a point. I didn't panic, not yet, just retightened my pack straps and got back on the trail with eyes now wide open, ears tuned in even more. A few hours later, I made camp in a grove of firs below the tree line, picked for its concealment. No fire, just cold food and a tight perimeter. I strung up a bear bag and cleared the brush, set my tent facing the slope so that I'd see anybody approaching me. I woke up around 2:43 a.m., and I remember because I checked my watch. It was the sound that did that, not a branch snap. Those are loud. This was a lot lighter and rhythmic, skin on skin contact like scratching. At first, I thought it was me, maybe in my sleeping bag, but no. This sound was coming from outside the tent, and it was steady. Soft inhales and exhales would join it, just beyond the nylon, maybe 6 inches away. I didn't move, I didn't breathe, I just laid there with every muscle screaming to act. Then just as softly I heard footsteps moving away, one slowly after another, like whoever it was didn't want to leave any kind of trail. I stayed there frozen for a full hour, and at sunrise I stepped out knife in hand and circled my tent. Obvious boot prints were littered around. Not mine either. These were wider and heavier, deep heel strikes. They circled my tent 3 times, then vanished down slope. I broke camp that morning in under 5 minutes. All day again I pushed myself hard, hiking like I was being hunted, which, to be honest, I probably was. I started to catch signs in the trail, snapped twigs, disturbed moss, prints in the mud patches, all the kind of things that you'd ignore if you weren't already on edge. But once you are, you see everything and your mind quickly becomes this tracking device. Later in the afternoon, I rounded a ridge and spotted this small designated camping zone near a food locker and collapsed ranger cache. One tent already staked out. Orange beanie on a branch. I stopped dead. The tent was zipped, no fire, no pack hanging. It looked like somebody set up and then quickly vanished. I debated pushing on, but I'm running on fumes here. My legs were jelly and a sprain out here could be the difference between walking out or bleeding out. So I did the dumb thing. I set up camp nearby, 50 feet off, knife in my sleeping bag, bear spray on the pillow. That was my line. If he tried anything, I'd end it there. I didn't cook, I just sat underneath the trees and listened and watched. Right before dark, I ended up going and checking out the shared fire pit, and somebody had left a gift. A deer skull, clean and white, its sockets packed with moss. Tied around the base was this strip of fabric, Under Armour, navy blue. It was mine. That night, for obvious reasons, I didn't sleep, not once. I sat upright with my bag and the mylar blanket wrapped around me and my shoulders, eyes locked on the outline of his tent through the trees. But here's the weird thing. He never came back. Not that night, and not at all. Just before dawn, I finally unzipped and approached it, ready for anything. It was empty. No bag, no gear, nothing but a ground tarp and an orange beanie. And inside it smelled like old leather and sweat. On the inside of the rainfly, scrawled in Sharpie, were 4 words. You sleep too hard. That was it. I stuffed everything into my pack and skipped breakfast and started bushwhacking toward the ranger station at 𝐬𝐻𝐻. No more trail, no more footprints, just adrenaline, instinct, and a whole lot of prayer. I made it to the 𝐬𝐻𝐻 ranger station just before dark, legs cramping, mouth dry, nerves completely fried. I must have looked feral, mud-caked, wild-eyed, gripping my knife like I wasn't done using it. The seasonal ranger on duty stepped out onto the porch and asked if I needed medical attention. I told him no, that I just needed to file a report. We sat inside and I gave him everything I could. The description of the man, the skull, the beanie, the message he left me. He didn't really write much down, he just kept nodding slowly like he'd heard this story before from somebody else. After I was done, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You're not the first person to see this guy." And that stopped me. He told me there'd been 3 complaints in the last 2 summers. Different hikers, same man. Always deep off the trail, always alone. Camo pants, bright beanie, never violent, never caught, never verified. "We try to patrol," the ranger said, "but this park's bigger than Rhode Island. And guys like that, they know how to disappear. They live out here. Might not even be doing anything illegal, technically. It's just enough to scare you. They offered to send a radio call to the Border Patrol station up in Waterton, but I declined. I didn't want to stick around for the paperwork. I was done and tapped out. And that night, I'd paid cash to a boat operator to ferry me across the lake and hitch back to my truck. I left Glacier a day early, and I've never gone back. But here's the part that still turns my stomach to this day. A week later, I'm home safe, clean sheets, locked doors, fridge full. I'm sitting on my porch drinking a coffee, trying to figure out what the hell that whole thing even meant. Was he just a twisted loner, some kind of predator? So then I go over to check my mailbox, and inside, wedged between utility bills and pizza flyers, it's a plain envelope. No return address, postmarked from Kalispell, Montana. Inside is a single strip of Under Armour fabric. Same navy blue as my shirt, same rip down the side. No note, no signature, just a reminder. Now, that all took place years and years ago, and I haven't been solo hiking since. I put a pause on my mail at the P.O. box because I explained the situation, so the postmaster suggested the guy somehow got his hands on my wallet out on the trail, lifted up my mailing address that way maybe. I guess it makes sense, but holy hell did it creep me out. So I stay on marked trails now. I bring buddies along with me, and I never entertain anybody that gives me that weird vibe anymore. I took the job because I was broke and pissed off at the world. My girlfriend had moved out 6 weeks before this, and I dropped out of my second community college program in 2 years. And I was also pretty sure my old man had stopped returning my calls on purpose. He cut me off after I dropped out again. We really never saw eye to eye after that. The idea of sitting in a wooden box at the top of a mountain for 3 months sounded damn near therapeutic at this point though. It was a fire lookout position, Olympic National Park, remote. You pack your food in once every couple weeks, use a radio to call in the weather and smoke reports, sleep in a cabin on stilts built back when people still give a shit about craftsmanship. I wasn't expecting a vacation, but I figured it would all clear my head. Now, this lookout tower sat at the end of a steep switchback trail, about 4 miles in from the ranger station. No one else for miles and miles around, no roads, no people, no phones. Just the birds, the trees, the sky, and the occasional deer that would freeze like a statue, then bolt at the sound of your own boots. There was a routine to it. Wake up with the light, drink some instant coffee that tasted like wood varnish, scan the horizon for smoke, log some cloud movement, and read some paperbacks during the dead hours. At night, I'd eat some canned chili or peanut butter sandwiches, stare up at the stars until my neck would hurt. I'd honestly never slept better in my life. The quiet to me wasn't creepy like I figured it'd be. It was clean. The tower itself was old but solid. 12 by 12 room with a cot, a desk, and windows on all sides. It creaked when the wind would kick up, made all kinds of settling noises at night, but nothing sinister. And besides, I am not the superstitious type. It wasn't until the second week that things began to shift. I was logging in some afternoon cumulus buildup to the east when I saw something near the ridgeline, a figure. It was just standing at the edge of the tree line too far out to make details, but clearly a person. No movement, no wave, no pack or any kind of gear. I radioed to Ranger Darlene back at base to let her know that somebody might be out here without any gear. She said hikers get turned around all the time. It probably was just a camper from the river trail below. But the next night, the figure was back, and this time it was closer, still not moving, just standing there at dusk, halfway up the switchback trail like he was thinking about coming up the rest of the way. He didn't, and I didn't sleep. On the third night, I brought my flashlight and a pocket knife and decided to hike down and say hello to him. That flashlight felt really small in my hand, but my pocket knife felt even smaller. I told myself I'm not going far, just to the first switchback, maybe even the second. If the guy was still out there, I'd call out. Maybe he was lost, maybe he needed help, Maybe he was just some hippie kid microdosing in the woods. Didn't even realize how goddamn weird he looked from a distance. But deep down, I already knew. The trail was dark, no moon, just stars and low-hanging mist creeping up between the branches. You know that kind of quiet that buzzes, where your ears start inventing sounds just to fill the vacuum? It was like that. Every broken twig, every brush of my jacket against the branch, every breath was way louder than it should have been. I made it to the first bend and paused. My beam swept across trunks and underbrush, catching nothing but shadows, no movement or figure. I started thinking to myself that I was being really stupid, that maybe Darlene was right this whole time. Maybe I was seeing shadows. I took a few more steps and then the brush exploded. He came out of the dark like he'd been crouched there this whole time waiting for me. I saw a flash of pale skin and bare arms, then a shoulder slammed into my gut and we both went down hard. The knife flew from my hand and the flashlight bounced once and then died. I hit the dirt on my back, gasped out loud and tried to get up, but he was on top of me in an instant. Heavy, smelled like sweat and mildew and rot. No words were even spoken, just hit me once across the mouth, hard enough to split my lip and rattle some of my molars. Then he grabbed at my jacket like he was trying to rip it off. I kicked and scrambled, got my knee up between us and pushed with everything I had. He didn't really go far, but it was enough to roll away and reach blindly through the dark. My fingers hit bark, then steel, the flashlight. I spun and swung it like a club and caught him somewhere near the jaw. I heard a grunt and he came at me again. But I was already stumbling back uphill, tripping over roots, half crawling back toward the tower. My lip was bleeding down my chin and the inside of my cheek felt like it had been grated. He didn't follow me all the way and I don't know why. Maybe he figured he made his point. Maybe he thought I'd be easy to finish off later. But I didn't look back to check. I climbed the tower stairs like my legs weren't even attached to me, kicked the hatch shut, dropped the latch, and then backed into the far corner of the room. I sat there in the dark with that knife in one hand and the flashlight in the other. Once I could finally breathe again, I slowly crawled to the desk and grabbed the radio. "Darlene," I said, voice rough. "Darlene, I need somebody out here now. I was just attacked." She came back a moment later, voice instantly sober.
What do you mean attacked? By a bear?
"No, a man." There was a pause. I could hear her scribbling something down.
You're sure?
"Yeah, he hit me, tackled me, split my damn lip. He's still out there."
All right. I'm sending 2 rangers in the morning. They can't get to the ridge until first light. Can you hold out?
I looked at the door, at the thin wooden walls. "Do I have a choice?" She didn't respond. The rest of that night was just a complete blur of adrenaline. I stayed crouched by the hatch, flashlight off, knife ready. I don't really know what I expected, another charge up the stairs, a rock through the window. But he didn't come back. But that's not to say he was gone. Every hour or so I'd hear something outside. Not wildlife, footsteps, measured. Sometimes crunching gravel at the base of the stairs, sometimes a soft scuff near the far tree line. Once around 4 a.m. I did see him again. He was crouched behind a log about 20 yards down slope. Moonlight had caught his bare back. He wasn't looking up, just waiting, like he was thinking, plotting, maybe even just enjoying all the fear. I wanted to scream, wanted to grab the flare gun and light up the night, but I knew better. If you wanted me dead, I'd be dead already. The sun took forever to rise, and the gray light spilled in through the east window. The Rangers showed up just after 7, crunching up the ridgeline with radios crackling and bear spray on their belts. 2 of them, both men I'd never met before, also with a German Shepherd that sniffed the tower steps like it knew exactly what had gone down. My lip was split, shirt torn, eyes wild from no sleep. I met them down the stairs and pointed toward the tree line without saying a word. They fanned out and one of them was moving slowly with a dog, the other marking prints with orange tape. I followed at a distance, holding a rag against my mouth. The adrenaline was far gone now, replaced by that numb shakiness that you get after a car accident. You're upright, but your body's still screaming. They found the blood about 20 feet down the slope. Not mine, darker and thicker. Drops at first, then a steady line through the underbrush, smeared on a low branch as if somebody had grabbed it while stumbling. I watched the ranger crouch beside it. He ran his fingers through the dirt and then looked up at me. "You get him with something?" "A knife. Maybe just a scratch though." He nodded. "Well, he bled like a stuck pig." The trail went another 100 yards before veering hard toward the shallow creek that cut through the valley. The water was high from snowmelt, and the current was moving fast over the rocks. The blood ended at the bank. Nothing on the other side. No exit prints. The boot tracks, just the water. "Could have followed the creek," the older ranger said. "Threw off the scent, or he went under." Nobody liked that. They combed the area for another 2 hours and found really nothing else. No gear, no campsite, no ID. The blood told one story, but everything else was refusing to talk. Darlene ended up coming later with coffee and a clean shirt. She looked at me for a long second and said, "You staying or heading out?" I didn't hesitate. "Out." She nodded, didn't even try to talk me down, just said, "Well, you wouldn't be the first." We hiked down together quietly, and when we reached the trailhead, I looked back up at the tower, high above the treetops. It looked small now against the mountain. I didn't go back to the Olympic. I didn't take another park job. I found an apartment, got a regular job at an auto shop, and told myself that I'd move on. And mostly, I have. I haven't been camping since it all happened. I haven't so much as pitched a tent in my backyard. And it's not the woods that did it. I love the woods, always have. It's the people. It's the not knowing of what somebody's capable of until you're 5 miles deep and nobody else is around to help you. My story takes place 6 years ago, Great Smoky Mountains, early spring. Me, Corey, and Paul. We'd been friends since high school, drifted in and out of each other's lives, but we always made time once a year for the guys' trip. No wives, no phones, just whiskey, crate meals, and whatever we could carry up in those hills. So that year we hiked out a little further than we normally do. Corey had mapped out this lesser-used trail that cut along the creek, eventually opening up into a clearing not far from a natural spring. Sounded perfect to me. Off-grid, off-map, no tourists, just what we wanted, right? It was a good first day too. Clear skies, just enough uphill to remind us that we weren't in our 20s anymore. No sign of another soul. We made up camp on this flat stretch near a creek. Hung the food, got a fire going, and passed around a bottle. We laughed a lot that night. That was the shit we were after. But I never would have dragged them out there if I knew that it'd almost kill them. Corey was the first one to notice the other camp. We were cleaning up dinner, just about to call it a night. He pointed upstream. Not far, maybe a football field away, was a faint flicker of reflected lights in the trees. At first, we all thought it was the moonlight catching something metal, but as our eyes adjusted, we saw the shape of a tent. One. No movement, no fire, no lantern glow, it was just kind of there. None of us had seen it during the hike in, and we definitely scouted that area earlier while looking for flat ground. Maybe they just set up after dark. Maybe they came in from another trailhead. Still, something about it kind of put a kink in the mood for the night. Paul made a joke about some deliverance shit. Corey tossed a beer bottle at his head. We laughed, but it felt forced. It wasn't even creepy, not yet, just strange, you know? You go out there to get away from people, and when they show up anyway, quiet and announced, it messes with your sense of control. I wish we would have walked over there just once and introduced ourselves, seen who was staying there, but we didn't. We let it be. And later that night, a man came walking out of the dark, said he was from that camp indeed, and asked if he could join us for a drink. He just appeared too. 1 second it was just us and the fire, the hiss of the creek water behind us, and then there he was, standing maybe 10 feet off, hands up, like we was afraid we'd spook him. "Evening," he said. "Didn't mean to sneak up on you guys." He was mid-40s maybe, thin and wiry, longish hair tied back in this ragged ponytail. His coat looked like it had been through some things, seen a lot. Grease smears, patches of dark mud. He held up this dented metal cup and grinned like he'd been invited to the campfire. "Name's Frank," he said. "Camp just upstream, figured I'd see who else was out there this far. You guys mind if I join you?" Corey looked at me and Paul was already moving over to another log, clearing up space. We said yes, but Christ, why? He sat down beside Corey and immediately reached for the whiskey. Didn't even ask, just poured a solid shot into his tin cup and tossed it back. "Good stuff," he said. "You guys come up from the West Trail or where?" Paul nodded. "Yeah, took the spur near Ben Oak. Been hiking all day." Frank got this creepy smile on his face then. "Oh yeah, I know Ben Oak." And then he just kind of sat there, didn't talk much unless we asked him some questions, and when he did answer, it was really short and almost mumbling. He wasn't friendly, but he wasn't threatening either. He was just off. About 20 minutes in, Corey started hinting. "All right, well, we're probably gonna turn in soon." Frank nodded, then poured himself another shot. Yeah, I should probably get back and check on my fire," he said, but he didn't move. Paul tried next. "So is your family up there with you, or?" He blinked. "What?" "Earlier you said you were camped upstream. I just kind of figured you were with somebody." Frank looked off toward the dark trees. "Oh, yeah, no, it's just me in the quiet." Then he started humming, a tuneless little thing almost like a kid sitting and rocking back and forth. It went on just long enough for Corey to stand up. "All right, man," Corey said, clapping his hands. "Good drink, good talk, but it's time to hit the sack." Frank didn't even look up, just swirled that whiskey around in his cup. "You think I'm weird?" he said softly. Nobody answered him. "You looked at me like I'm nothing," he added, voice rising. "Been laughing at me since I got here." Paul said to him, "No one's laughing, man. It's just late, that's all." Frank stood up fast, and from his coat pocket he pulled something shiny, a razor blade, long and ruthless, that he held between two fingers. "You shouldn't look at me like that," he shouted. Corey stepped back. "Hey, take it easy." But Frank lunged. They went down hard, Corey and Frank tumbling into the brush, flashlight beam jerking wildly. There was shouting, snapping branches, and then nothing. Me and Paul ran after them, stumbling through the trees, calling Corey's name, the fire behind us fading into a dull orange flicker. "Corey!" I shouted. "Corey! Answer me!" But I didn't get anything. We searched for a full hour and the dark got thicker. At one point, Paul twisted his ankle inside this gopher hole, nearly went down. We all kept shouting, but still got nothing back. I was starting to think that we'd need to run the trail, get help. And then, suddenly we found him. Corey was huddled under the deadfall, breathing like a freight train. His jacket was slashed open at the arm and across the side, blood, not pumping, but surface cuts. "He chased me," Corey said. "He didn't say a word, he just kept coming like a goddamn machine. I cut right back and then jumped the creek and lost him in the rocks." Paul helped him up and we half carried him back toward the camp. My flashlight flickered the whole way. When we reached the fire ring, our stuff was untouched. The fire had died down, but nothing had been tampered with, except for one thing. Frank was gone. No sign of him, no trail, no drop blade, just boot prints. We kept the fire burning all night and nobody slept. We took shifts watching the trees and listening. Once around 3 a.m. we heard something, not footsteps, more like breathing and hacking, slow and deep, just beyond the tree line. Not coming any closer, it was just kind of there. I heard Paul whisper, "He's watching." I nodded but didn't say it out loud. Frank had never left. At first light, we broke up camp in silence. Corey's arm was wrapped tightly in this cut-up shirt. His shoulder was crusted over and looked angry. We moved fast, no breakfast, no morning coffee, just packed up our gear with shaking hands and just got the hell out of there. I don't think anybody spoke until we hit the trail junction, and that's when Paul said it. "We gotta report this." And nobody disagreed with him. We continued on that long hike out, 5 miles, mostly downhill. The sun was already warming up the valley, and the woods didn't look so scary in the daylight, but none of us were fooled. There's something wrong in those trees, and it had a face now. As we passed the other camp, Frank's camp, we slowed up to a crawl. It was still there, a tent, folding table, a couple of camp chairs, and a blue cooler. But now it wasn't empty. There were people. A woman with a ponytail was brushing this little girl's hair near the tent. A teenage boy tossed sticks into the creek. Their dog was trotting around, tail wagging. And there was Frank. He was crouched over the fire pit, wearing a clean flannel, sleeves rolled up. No sign of the maniac who chased Corey through the brush with a blade. Not a twitch. No wildness in the eyes, just calm like he belonged there. He saw us as we passed him, and he waved. A slow, friendly, almost cheerful wave. None of the others reacted. None of them looked at us like anything was wrong. Not the woman, not the kids. Nobody flinched. We didn't wave back, we just kept walking. At the ranger station, we made a report and told them everything. The midnight visitor, the blade, the injuries, the camp, the weirdness. Corey lifted up his shirt and showed him the cuts. Paul gave them a timeline. I handled the map and pointed out exactly where it happened. A ranger, this older guy, listened without interrupting us. He took a few notes, but didn't look too surprised. "All right, yeah, we'll look into it," he said. And we asked if they'd follow up, and he said probably, but we knew the answer was most likely no. That's just kind of how things go in the backcountry. Things get muddy, no cell service, no evidence, and sometimes the only thing you've got is your word, and that's not really enough. We drove home in silence. I dropped Paul off first and then Corey, and nobody talked about doing it again next year. But here's the part that matters to me. We didn't fall apart. Corey joined the gym and started running again. I started going to church with Paul, and something that I hadn't done in years. We got beers on Thursdays too. We didn't really talk about the man in the woods, but we all felt it, how close it got, how fast something normal could really turn inside out. We ended up staying super close after that, still are. I think it made us tighter, closer. So no, I don't camp anymore. I don't just wander trails just to clear my head. But I trust my friends more than I trust anybody else on this planet. And if a stranger walks out of the trees again, this time I'll know exactly what to do. I run trails to get out of my head, and that's what I told my therapist at least. Shenandoah seemed perfect. Long loops, zero cell reception, and a cabin rental with no electricity. I packed light with some trail runners, protein bars, headlamps, bear spray. I wasn't trying to prove anything, just wanted to move, breathe, and forget a name that had been coming up in my sleep for the last 6 months. It was Saturday, around 6:30 in the evening. I was halfway through a 10-mile loop when I spotted that shortcut, a narrow offshoot, not on the park map, but listed on all trails as unofficial but passable. It would shave off 2 miles, and the sun was already dipping behind the ridgeline, so I took it. The first quarter mile was fine, a little overgrown and a few spider webs here and there. Then the brush got dense. I ducked under this low branch and nearly missed it, tucked between 2 poplars, half concealed by leaves and netting. A deer blind. And not one of those prefab plastic deals. This one was homemade. Branches lashed with twine, a sheet of burlap stapled to the frame, camo netting over the front. So I paused. Curiosity's a hell of a thing. Inside the blind was a folding chair, a disposable camera, and a small pair of binoculars. On the floor, a Ziploc bag full of used tissues and candy wrappers, Butterfingers mostly. I stood there for half a second too long because behind me, on the trail I just left, somebody stepped on a stick. I turned around and there was a man standing there. I didn't move and neither did he. He was tall and maybe in his late 40s, tan canvas coat, ball cap, and a long narrow face that didn't really blink. I stood there at the mouth of the trail like a gatekeeper, like he'd been expecting me to stop at that exact spot. "Evening," I said, voice flat, trying to sound like I wasn't rattled. Nothing, just the tilt of his head. And that was enough for me. I turned and bolted into the woods. Not back the way I came and not toward him. I went sideways, cutting through the brush, ducking branches and letting instinct take the wheel. Behind me, the leaves began to rustle, slow at first and then speeding up. I ran harder. The terrain dipped and twisted, a tangle of rocks and down limbs, and I caught my foot on something thin, a wire, and went down hard. My palms were scraped, my teeth clacked, my right wrist lit up with pain. This guy had set up a trip line. My breathing got shallow and really fast too. My brain wanted to freeze, but my legs just wouldn't quite let it. I pushed off the ground and sprinted uphill through the switchbacks, dead leaves, using trees for balance. I didn't dare look behind me, but I still heard it. Whistling. A steady, breathy whistle rising up and falling, like sonar bouncing off the trees. True hillbilly nightmare shit. I kept running until I saw something ahead, another structure. A second blind. This one was a lot bigger and square. No netting this time, just raw branches, and inside, tacked to the frame with rusty nails, were a bunch of Polaroids. At least a dozen of them. All of them showed hikers, different ones on different days, always from behind, always from cover. And you can probably guess that one of these photos was me. Same leggings, same pack, same ponytail, taken that morning. I felt like I'd swallowed ice. I spun around and sprayed behind me. Full burst from the bear canister. The mist bloomed orange and sour. If he was there, he was gonna choke on it. I took off again, down this steep grade. Knees were shot, breath running ragged, but I knew I was bleeding, and I didn't care. I just needed a road, a ranger, a goddamn helicopter at this point. I crested a ridge and saw blacktop far below, just a sliver of road winding through the hills. My salvation. I barreled down a deer trail, far too fast and slipping, catching my arms on thorns. I didn't even notice the second man until he stepped out on the trail 10 yards ahead of me, older and gray, holding a hiking stick. He raised up a hand. "Hey there, are you okay?" I stopped to bear spray up, chest was hammering. "You look hurt," he said. His smile was calm, weird. He took a step closer, and behind me I heard that whistle again. Closer. I didn't wait. I turned and ran off the trail, through the brush and downhill. I didn't care about the rocks or the slope or the pain in my calf. It was pure nerve and motion, and if I stopped, I knew I'd be gone. I crashed through the last round of trees and hit the asphalt hard, hands first, then my knees. My wrists screamed, but I was out. A ranger truck ended up rounding the corner and then braked so fast that the tires chirped ahead of me. The driver jumped out, eyes wide. "Ma'am?" I couldn't speak, I could only point back at the woods. The ranger got me in the truck and called it in, shaking so hard that I spilled that water bottle that he handed me. My wrists were starting to swell up, my leg was bleeding, but I kept saying the same thing. "There's two of them. There's two of them." I told him about the deer blinds, the tripwire, the Polaroids, the fucking whistle, and the second man on the trail. He kept glancing over at the tree line with one of the most terrified expressions I'd ever seen on a person's face. By the time backup finally arrived, 2 more rangers and a deputy, the sun was up and my panic was starting to wear off, enough that I could walk them back part way. We found that first blind. Well, kind of. The framework was there, collapsed, half covered by a camo tarp. No chair, no camera, no Ziploc, no prints. And the second blind was gone. Just empty woods. I kept pointing back to where the things had happened, where I tripped, where the photos had been. Of course, they found nothing, and the ranger didn't say it, but I could see it in his eyes. Maybe she got turned around, maybe it was an animal, maybe she was just panicking. They drove me out of the park, took my statement, took pictures of my wrists and the cut on my leg, told me to call if I remembered anything else, but I never did. There were no follow-up calls, no news reports, no arrest. Like those 2 perverted hillbillies just up and vanished.